we are not issued the equipment. You know, the equipment that I use is my own personal equipment. Yeah, or even my phone, depending on the circumstances. And I think our biggest challenge is the training aspect of it. I think we would embrace, and I know I would, the ability to shoot both still and video, because video is pretty much key. But it's just for us, you know, just to. I haven't exactly started just yet, but right now my focus would be to find someone that, you know, preferably on the National Guard side, that, you know, can, if we can maybe set up something to do some type of training, you know, we can set a weekend day to, you know, get some of that training.
So tell us a little bit about your experience as a photographer, so that we can kind of see how you could leverage that as like a quid pro quo, like you go in and do some still, they come in and do some video.
As far as the photography side, I've done probably about 13 years worth as a professional photographer. So I've got quite a bit of experience. I've been through training as well as, you know, kind of learn on the fly, self-taught YouTube videos, you know, you name it, you know, because it's a constant learning process. You know, if you're not learning, then you're not doing something right. So with that aspect, for someone who doesn't have that skill set, you know, that's where we can kind of, you know, do the even train. But, you know, you want to get with the air crew, get with, you know, say this is what we're going to do, you know, get our communication together and just basically put that whole packet together, because if you don't do it safely, then, you know, you negated the whole reason of being there. So when I get there, you know, I already kind of.
Yeah, so I'm kind of the same way, where I like to have a general idea of what I'm going out to shoot, but sometimes it's either a routine thing, so you just want to make sure you know the location and what the lighting is for one. I run into that all the time in military installations, because everything's just like dark, or the white balance gets all messed up because of how like yellow the lighting is. So I always make sure I have like a flash with me, or I know what it's going to be like, and I always show up 30 minutes early usually, and shoot a little bit, make sure everything's right, make sure I know who the key players and whatever event is going on are there. Sometimes it's not a cut and dry event, it's just people are hanging out or doing something more dynamic, and so you just gotta be flexible. And that's something I've learned as a photographer, is just being really flexible and being able to jump to wherever the action is happening.
So whenever you guys go out and get your shot, like, how do you start to really piece together this story that you're trying to tell? Like, what are some things that you really look for?
I think it does go back to the human element, and trying to see, I kind of look for the people who have the most expressive faces, or the, like babies, are the people who, you know, the image is just gonna look kind of great, or it's gonna tell the right story for the event. So I don't think you can always go into an event expecting to tell a specific story. You can kind of have an idea of what you would like to say, but you can't stay rigid with that. You have to adjust as things change, and really look for the key players in an atmosphere, and see who's doing what, and really capture that.
So, Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about your kit, and kind of the one piece that, like, you can't leave home without, and what you would tell people who are kind of worried about the equipment that they're using?
As far as equipment, the very first thing is know your equipment. You know, that may not always be the case. Somebody may hand you something here, go take some pictures, you can be a fast learner. But I think the most important thing is you, the person, knowing how to use the equipment. Because once you know the basics, you know, whether someone hands you a Nikon or Canon or Sony, you'll be able to take a picture. You know, so. But other than that, as far as the kit, you know, you want your basic things, of course, your body, batteries, you know, a wide angle, telephoto, and probably a big zoom. And that way, flash, and that way you have your whole gamut that you need. Because then sometimes, like myself, I have probably more gear than I ever need. Sometimes I have the problem of showing up with too much gear. I learned that on the first deployment with the floods in 2016. It's like, you know, I'm showing up with a ton of bags. Harvey came along, I was down to a Pelican case, because, you know, I need to be flexible, you know, jumping off the back of a truck, getting in the water, you know, you need to tailor your equipment to whatever mission that you're gonna be on. But beyond that, yeah, just having the basic kit, the knowledge of how to use that kit, and not being afraid to use it. Don't be afraid to get in someone's face and take, not in a rude way, but if you're using a wide angle lens, you don't need to be standing 20 feet back trying to take a picture. You need to get up in there so you can get the shot that you're wanting to.
On that topic, Jordan, you shot at Andrews, and so kind of tell us about your experience of working with the civilian press pool and trying to make sure you can, weigh the protocols of things with still being able to do your own job.
So I've photographed high-level officials and the president quite a few times. There was one time in Arlington, and with the president, you're always with his giant press pool, which is usually about 15 people, and that's a combination of video and photo. And so I think the most recent one was at Arlington National Cemetery for Memorial Day. There was a wreath laying, and we were cramped into this little corner. I think it was about the size of like this corner here. And I remember showing up, and they were already situated. I came after them, and I'm just trying to find like a space in this giant crowd of people, trying to get any kind of shot. And one of the photographers was like, "Oh, you can stand where I'm standing, but as soon as he walks out, you need to move so I can get my spot back." And I'm just like, "Okay," and I'm just terrified because all these people, this is their job. I mean, this is, if they don't get the shot that they need, they're on the line. So I ended up just all these times is I try and be as respectful as possible, and I've still gotten pretty good shots, but it's kind of funny because you'll end up standing up, briefly getting in someone's shot, you'll hear them like curse or something, and then you just like bounce back down, and so you kind of have to push that limit a little bit to get your own shot, but you're respectful of these other photographers, and it's a really interesting experience, but it's been a lot of fun.
So as we kind of plan for these shots, like what are some of the considerations that you guys are thinking about beforehand about kind of where it's going to go, like where your content is going to go, and think how that kind of changes the way that you look at an assignment?
So usually I always get back with the command information lead or whoever is assigning me a shoot, and if nobody's assigning me, I kind of figure out where that content is going in the long run. So sometimes it'll be change of command, and it'll most likely just be on the website or on Facebook. And so I'm most likely going to shoot like horizontally. I'm going to get images of family, of the main key shots. I try and get some of the audience, just an overall of everything going on. But in other cases, or something I've started to do, especially being really involved in social media, is I've started to shoot vertically. So if I know I'm going to use something on Instagram, I will always get a few vertical shots, and I won't necessarily use all of them, but I make sure to get everything I can for any possible platform I'm going to use it on. So I just quickly swap between vertical, horizontal, and then I pretty much just try and capture everything just in case, but it's also good to be driven and know exactly what you need to get.
Yeah, like she said. But basically, just be prepared for all of those platforms. Even if I'm not prepared to shoot vertically, then I'll just pull out and shoot horizontally to where I can go in and crop a vertical image out. So, there's more than one way to skin a cat, but, with the way technology is, a lot of the pictures I've found, especially like with Harvey, probably 70-80% of my shots were with my cell phone. Because it's there, waterproof, that helps. And you can get shots a lot of times with that you can't get with the camera.
What model cell phone at the time?
At that time I had the Galaxy 7.
Oh, okay.
I'm with the 9 Plus now.
So what would you tell somebody who, our training cycles are often cyclical, so it's the same events every year. You're going to have a change of command every 2 years. You're going to go to the range about once a year. So people who are constantly being assigned on the same assignments over and over and over again, what are some ways that they can try to mix that up so that it doesn't feel repetitive and it can be personally gratifying?
I found that for me, when I go back and look at my previous year's images of the same type of events, I see a progression. I use it kind of like a training tool. I look at it as practice. This year's images should not look like the ones 3 years ago. If it did, something's wrong. But saying that, I go back and I'll look at those images and say, what can I have done better? And then I'll try to implement those Or same thing with what's the current trend, like you say, vertical. I'll make sure that I try to incorporate some of those trends in the next shoot, and just things like that keeps it fresh.
And I think creativity is a really important part in kind of testing what you can do and how you can look at things differently. But I know for those events that happen every single year, one thing I go into it thinking is that it's a different person on the other end of the lens. If it's a change of command, this is a new person gaining command. So I know that it matters to them to have these images to share with their family or whatever else. And so I kind of look at it less as a burden on me to just take the same shot, but more as adding value to that person's life. They get these images, and to them it's new. So I kind of just have that mindset shift whenever I go on a new shoot, or the same shoot but different people.
But Tim, you said you've been doing this for 15 years now. So what have been some of the biggest changes from when you started to now that have really had a big impact?
Mainly equipment.
Yeah.
Of course, digital photography is getting better. And I started out at the tail end of 35 millimeter. Digital now allows you to shoot a tremendous amount of pictures. That doesn't always make you a better photographer, because now you're relying on, well, I'll just shoot that same shot 20 times and then there's going to be a good one in there.
It's the Randall method. If it moves, you shoot it.
Yeah, taking the time to compose, because back in the day, Photoshop was done in the camera. With your eye, you look to make sure all the lighting. Now, you got a safety blanket, which that's great in a lot of these events, because you can go through, bullet, run a little bit Photoshop, bam, you got a finished product. So that makes I think the hard part is try not to get complacent with technology. You still want to be a photographer when you're creating the image, and kind of use Photoshop as a last resort. If something didn't quite work out right, then you can pop a little bit of HDR, bring some of the shadows out, and then you still have a usable image. But I guess the biggest thing is just don't become complacent with the technology, because technology is going to always get better.
Yeah. So somebody who is probably shooting full auto right now, what's kind of a good first step to kind of break out of that and start to do more in-camera editing?
Practice, and more practice. You find something that you have a passion for, and you just go shoot it. If you like shooting butterflies, and you maybe spend a couple of hours sitting there at the botanical garden shooting butterflies, and you start seeing a pattern. And also I go online and look at other people's pictures and what I have interest in, and shoot them a message. Hey, what settings did you use to get this shot? And then you go and try to recreate it, and then kind of build your own style of shooting.
So I don't think either of you have done much video, but maybe Jordan, if you can kind of talk about how you guys are using video at AFWorks now to help tell your story, and what are some of the things that you're seeing that it
Practice and put everything together. Still haven't finished the video. I need to do that. But it gives you kind of like you've committed to creating something, and now it's like you have to do it. You have to figure it out, and as you go, you realize how many things you don't know, but how many things you have the opportunity to figure out as you're creating the video. So you'll sit down and you'll be like, oh, how do I put two clips together, or how do I cut a clip? And you have to Google it, because now you've committed and you have to do this thing. So you start to learn that way. I think has been the best thing for me.
So one of the big arguments with the merger has been, we're taking away the ability for soldiers to really become technical experts on one, aspect of it. So kind of what do you think as thinking about that argument? Do you think there's merit there? Do you kind of find that maybe this is a better way to go, or have you been resistant to the change?
So initially I was resistant, just because I've just been concerned about my ability to learn video. But the more I've done it, and the more I've talked with outside media and other professionals in the creative space, it's almost necessary in today's day and age to be able to be at least a little bit of a jack of all trades. You need to know at least a little bit, so that you can push yourself if you need to make a new version of content. Just because that's how media works now. It's especially with video. I mean, video is how most people consume their content nowadays, or at least the younger crowd, I guess. And so you have to if you're gonna evolve with the times. Otherwise, you get stuck just doing the same thing, and you don't really add that much new content to your resume or whatever else. So, and now I see it as an opportunity, because I have to do it. It's like, all right, I don't have an option. I'm gonna get better at this. I'm going to become a better creator, because I have the opportunity to do this. So.
Tim?
Well, in that instinct, I think it does make you a better person. I mean, because it's easy to kind of fall back in that complacency where, you know, you get comfortable at what you're doing. Sometimes we have to step out the box to become more creative. And having the ability to do multiple things makes you more, productive, and, you know, it makes you more valuable to the organization because now they can use you on more than just one thing. You know, it's just, I don't know what to say. Just, you know, video, like I say, I've learned, you know, you need to learn how to do video. And also, too, in the private sector, you know, with magazine publishing and whatnot, I learned real quick that anybody can take a picture. But when you take a picture and then you can write a 2,000-word article on top of that, you're more marketable. You have a better chance of getting published. Same thing with stills, where if all you do is shoot stills, then you limit yourself. But if you take the opportunity to learn video, now you just open yourself up to another part of the market, and that makes it better for everybody.
All right, so now we're going to open ourselves up. So if anybody has any questions or things that they're kind of curious on the topic, yeah.
My question is, when you're out in the field and you are taking photos or video, and it's not a soldier, somebody in uniform, a service member, and it's somebody from the public, what is the latest on being able to use their image? Do you have to have a release or something that you have them sign?
I do have photo releases, so if I'm specifically taking pictures that's involving a person, a lot of times I've already gone up and asked, you know, do you have a problem with it? Now, it can be a slippery slope because if you're in a public park or a public area, you know, you don't always have to take those steps, but we live in a world of liability, you know, so it's best to go ahead and, you know, try to forge that relationship with that person because you never know what that opportunity down the road that may bring you. But you can never go wrong with having, you know, model releases. You know, there's one shoot I'm getting ready to go do. I have to go get a photography permit with the city because I'll be taking pictures of their logo and their aircraft and their buildings. So I have to go get a permit to be able to do that, which doesn't make sense. But you know, if I want to do the article, then I need to go and do that. So.
Jordan, have you ever run into a time when someone said, "Don't take my picture," that you kind of had?
One of the military members who said that, and I'm like,
Specifically,
oh, you don't have the right
yeah. So, because you know, as a member of the military, you know, save our special forces, you know, there really is no reasonable expectation of privacy in that matter. So, how'd you handle that?
So usually, I know when I was younger or like lower ranking, I would just kind of be like, okay, sir, or whatever else. I usually wouldn't release it. It was just kind of a respectful thing for me. If it was, I know hypothetically, if it was a really important image or it really related to the story, or he's just in the group that is there, I'm like, I'd just tell them, like, I'm sorry, like this is something that you're here, you're serving, you're on active duty orders or whatever else, and this is just part of the deal. But I haven't run into that like in person where it's such an integral part of the story that I need to tell them I'm using the photo anyway. So I can't say that interaction, but I know on the side I've done street photography, which is kind of a weird place to run into, where you're just like walking downtown DC and you're just taking photos of people on the street. And so I haven't run into anybody there either, but I've gotten some weird looks. People who are like, "Why are you taking my photo?" And so I'm not sure what I would do. I kind of test the water just to see what's going to end up happening. But
On that, from a PAO standpoint in the military, I have, you know, when you show up with the camera, people start, you know, moving around, and I don't want to be, but a lot of times to counter that, I just go up and just start, hey, I need you to fix your hat, I need you to do this, move this model out of the way, I need y'all to stand here, don't look at me, just keep doing what you're doing. And I start, you know, I find that if you just go in, take charge, give direction, they don't have time to think about, I don't want to be in the picture. And then you got your shot, and then you move on to something else.
Yes.
Mentioning about touching up on photographs, I do know that there is a rule or an extent to where, to my understanding, I think for official government photos, obviously altering I would think, I I had heard that there cannot be like any of it, and then I'm also hearing maybe, well, cropping it, maybe to a certain extent, or and you mentioned about HDR, which I do agree. I think HDR does really help images regardless. But is that to a certain extent, or I thought maybe DoD policy or DINFO's policy stated that there cannot be any manipulation whatsoever with the original image that's created.
So far, I haven't run into that particular, like, hey, you can't do this.
Mhm.
But on the same token, I don't alter the images. Like, what's in there is
Mhm.
what now I will color correct.
Okay.
Which, HDR is from a color corrector, especially on bright sunny days where you've got shadow.
Mhm.
I just use that just to pop the shadow out just a little bit, and maybe give a little, because Canon cameras tend to shoot a little flat or neutral, whereas Nikons tend to have a little more saturation. So
Okay.
I'll go in and do that to bring the colors out just a tad bit. But as far as somebody's got a scar on their head, that's
Right.
how you look when I took the picture. That's so I will not alter any of that. Of course, cropping. I'll crop out. Now I have cropped out people, because there are certain times where especially when you're photographing a group,
Uh-huh.
and then obviously you want to put your best foot forward. You don't want someone who doesn't necessarily wear the uniform right or well. And if that was a chance that you had to take that shot before you could go and kind of fix it up, then yes, I will crop. To make sure I'm focused on the main subject of that picture.
Okay.
So I haven't really heard anything that explicitly states what you can and can't do. I think what I've seen is a lot of stuff is just weeded out by like your NCO or whoever's reviewing the photo, because it's obvious if you've edited it a lot. And there's also, if you do some extreme editing and it's part of the artistic process, you can label it as like an illustration or something else. So as long as you acknowledge that it was highly edited, that's a different story as long as you label it. But I know a good rule of thumb for any photograph that you take and you're editing is if you're trying to make it look more like it looked in person to your own eye, then that's pretty acceptable. Like, because you might take a photo that's a whole lot darker, but because you shot in RAW, you can brighten it up a whole lot, and it doesn't look like the image that you actually took, but in person it would have looked the exact same. So that's generally the rule of thumb I go by.
Yes.
Do you ever come across any OPSEC issues, and who do you run your photos by to make sure everything's safe to post?
So usually I'll try and find a subject matter expert in whatever unit I'm photographing. There's also usually an office at different units that does security and policy review. I mean, I know public affairs does a whole lot of it as well, but I'm not sure who that would.
In the Army, it's the SSO, the Site Security Officer or Office.
Yeah, and that's just something. I would say in general, hey, this is something that is where I've photographed somebody who wasn't wearing their safety goggles for a specific procedure when they're doing maintenance, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not maintenance, so I couldn't have said one way or another. So it's like you almost have to just ask at the beginning, like, is everything according to the AFI or your own guidelines before I release these photos? Which I think that just has to be something you just do from the beginning.
Yeah, like I said, we really don't run too much across that with State Guard, but I have taken pictures of certain, satellite dishes and whatnot, and I was specifically told don't take a picture of the head unit, but, or things like that. So I try to get shots where you see like the backside of the dish or something like that. But from what I've been experiencing, if there's something that I'm not supposed to take a picture of, I'm definitely, when PAO shows up, they're like, don't take a picture of this, and this. So.
And if nobody's doing that, so it doesn't hurt to ask, is there anything sensitive or classified here that we don't want to capture? Yes.
So there is a DoD style guide,
Right.
July 2018, extremely explicit on what you can, what you can't do. You can't crop out a person just because they're standing there because you've altered what was taken in your camera. So then it is then considered an illustration because you've altered what you originally took. So cropping somebody out of the photo is altering the photo. So you have to state that in there, cropped for more clear visual focus, but you have to put that in the caption. And there's so many things now over the years that they have gotten so specific on The rule of thumb that I got way back when, and I didn't do wet processing, but what I was told was the rule of thumb is if you can do it in the wet room, the dark room, thank you. If you can do it in a dark room, it's probably going to be okay to do it in a digital camera. If you were to take the photo and you'd have to literally cut it, you can't do something like that unless you say that this has been altered in such, which is why they always say edit in your camera. Be aware of what's behind them, what's sticking out of their head, who's beside them. Shift your body just 10 degrees to the left so that you don't have those people in. Zoom in just a little bit so that you are editing in your camera and you're grabbing exactly what you want. To me specifically, because it cuts down the time when you get into the office of yep, no, and then I take all those. I star mine. I put mine in Bridge. So I open all my photos in Bridge. I do all my renaming, my Varen. I've got a template that I do that has all of my information in there. So I just smack that sucker in there, and the only thing I have to change is the headline and the description, or actually the headline, but the headline and the description, and if the location is different. And then I can go into Bridge and make those slight adjustments to 20 photos because they're all orange because I took them in PR. And I can do all those literally in 30 seconds. Save it all, and I am done.
That's a good point about workflows, developing a good workflow that works for you. So I use Bridge as well, and I know my own personal workflow I can get through and have a photo story done in an hour as opposed to a day, because figuring out what works for you for the equipment that you have is really important to make sure you can get your product turned around as quickly as possible. So what kind of workflow tips would you guys have?
Same thing. I use Bridge. Go in and then depending on how heavy of editing that I do, I can use Lightroom or Photoshop if it's something that's really in depth. But Bridge is a wonderful tool.
So yeah, I shoot in camera raw, and then I go into Bridge and basically star
Always shoot in camera raw. If your photographers are not shooting in camera raw, take their camera away, change the setting, and hand it back.
So it's so much extra work too if you're pulling everything into the normal Photoshop. So there's editing and raw in Photoshop, and then there's just editing in Photoshop. And Photoshop opens up each of those windows, and then you have to go through and save as. Maybe I just don't know the shortcut, but it's always annoyed me. But then with camera raw, it opens them all up, and you go through. You can do the same crop, and it just goes down the line, and then you can Control A and just save all the documents, all the photos the same way. It's super easy.
Yeah, so the big thing with camera raw, if you're not familiar, so a camera raw file, it will be about 30 or so megabytes, and then a JPEG would be closer to about 5 or 6. So if you think about the amount of just raw data that exists in that photo, that's why you're able to manipulate it and add, really bring up the brightness without causing too much distortion, or work with the color correction. So there's just so many more physical ones and zeros in that file size. So adding distortions. So I'll talk to you about the workflow because that sounds miserable to add that many. Bridge is a great tool. Lightroom is a great tool where you can just open them all up and do it all at once and then save it, save as and export. And so that'll kind of save you. But again, just figuring out what workflow works for you to help you get your products turned around quicker. Any questions? Yes.
Kind of a two-part question. The first part of it is there any plans in the future to have a training workshop for Premiere Pro? Because a lot of the folks that are PA aren't video centric, and just learning the basics, getting somebody to stand in front of you for 4 hours or 6 hours or whatever, with breaks of course, will help bridge that gap. Now, the second part of that question I'm going to say before you even open your mouth. When are the units going to be graced with a license for lynda.com? So you don't have to go to YouTube and try and think and find it's in Lynda. You can't get it. I have a Lynda, but you can't get into Lynda, and I logged on with 4 computers so that everybody can watch this, and it's the training conversion, so that they can ease through this and be able to understand what's going on step by step, rather than spending half the day going through YouTube trying to find the right one,
Mm-hmm.
when a number of the different MatchComs are already using lynda.com for that training purpose.
So I'll do number 2 and then I'll hand it over to Kyle. I know for the regular Army, APAC did a mass licensing for us, so maybe with Sergeant Wheeler here, we can talk about NGB doing something similar, or being able to reach back to DINFOS and create that library of content that we can use to train. But honestly, the easiest thing to do is really, if you can justify it, you should be able to buy it. And I know that's like, it's always hard to say, just go buy it. But when you really look at investing in our soldiers, investing in their future, in their careers, this is a hill to die on, because whether we like it or not, content is going to video. Like, there's so much more video content out there, and nothing will ever replace a great photo. But if we have soldiers who are just physically incapable of creating video, then we're limiting the ability we have to tell our unit's story. So this, I think, would be is a solid investment, something that you really should pitch, and provide options and use this as one of your preferred courses of action. Because lynda.com is a great resource, and it relatively inexpensive as opposed to putting somebody, activating them and sending them to school for a month, or doing whatever you have to do to try to get them back to DINFOS, which is difficult for their civilian careers and just for their family situations. But if you can provide an opportunity where they can learn it through something like Lynda, then I think that's a more valuable. You get a lot more return on that investment. I don't know if you guys have anything to add on that front.
The Lynda, before we step over to the other one, the lynda.com is, I came from the Reserve, the Air Force Reserve, and I've got about 10 and a half years broadcast experience and about 20 years photography and PA. And I just came from the Reserve, and the Reserve MatchCom bought lynda.com, like they bought 500 licenses,
Right.
and said, basically free for all, get the people in there, get them signed up, mainly because you can take that and use that tool to help promote your airmen, because it's the self-improvement tool, because it keeps track. You can prove that this is what they did.
Do you know how many of those 500 were actually utilized?
Every single one of them, minus about 5%.
Okay, so we did a similar thing in the Army, and it was a vastly different result, where I want to say it was less than a third were actually used. And so,
I can speak to that.
Sounds
Yeah.
like the Air
Yeah.
Force.
So the Army, all 3 compos, APAC worked out a deal with lynda.com, which is no longer lynda.com, it's LinkedIn Learning, who bought lynda.com out. They bought 1,700 licenses for the Army. About a year into it, it was TRADOC money. TRADOC spent 60 grand on it. TRADOC went back and looked at it, and they were, if anybody's dealt with TRADOC before, they like to, they shift money around a lot like the stock market. They discovered that we had 680 something licenses, 700 licenses or so for the Army Guard. Overall, they probably saw a usage rate of about 30-35%. TRADOC turned around and said after a year, you obviously don't need it, and cut the funding. Because we, as a service, did not do our part and use the license. Now, I fought back and said, well, let's look at the usage rates for the, and see where, oh, wait a minute, during each month there was a spike. For my Guard licenses, that means that, oh my God, they were using it during drill. That makes sense. But TRADOC had already cut the funding and didn't really care. So now I will tell you, there is a workaround for that if you want. Who has a pro version or pro license of LinkedIn or LinkedIn? Okay, it's free for you. If you're a veteran or you're current military, you can get a free upgrade to a Prime account, and it automatically gives you access to LinkedIn Learning or lynda.com. I have the listing of Quebec and Romeo or print and broadcast specific classes that I can forward to Sergeant Burns if he doesn't already have it, and you can go in there and you can use that. We didn't want to use that as a primary way of solving the problem, because the dime is on the soldier or the airman or the civilian to do it. We wanted the service to come up with a way to fix it, but it doesn't look like they're going to give us the money. And I'll tell you right now, NGB is not going to fund it.
But to keep the numbers down, because 1,700 is an extreme number.
Well, that was for all 3 compos of the Army.
Right, but if you
So-
look at how many units are in there, and it's not the way to do it, but it is a way to at least introduce your office to how good it is, to see if you can then talk your command into buying off on that, spending that extra money, is start off with one license per unit.
Sure.
Not per
Also-
squad, but per unit.
I've been told you can also access it at your public library for free, that you don't need to have an account, that if your library has an account, you can utilize it there as well.
But we work with the Navy.
But also, it's a very little known resource that the Air Force created is called Blank Slate. And they created a bunch of videos, how-tos, because for their merge
Yeah,
on
I've seen
divots.
them. I've seen them.
And there's 15 or
Linda-
20 of them, and they're
Yeah.
really well made.
They are, but Lynda.com
and-
goes so much more in depth. So
Yeah,
much
yeah,
more in
right,
depth.
but again, it's a funding thing, and funding for us is tight regardless of the service and functional area. But those are some kind of ways you can get around it.
So another way that all of us should be looking at are unit-led learning opportunities, and so we'll hand it over to Sergeant Burns.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. What I'm taking away is something that you're very interested in, that we think the field might really benefit from. So I'll do what I can to see what I can get Texas to do about this, and our funding up there. Maybe we can see if we can just secure one seat per major PAO unit that we can have, where everybody can share it. Alternatively, I'm going to give you two solutions. One is you can always request us to physically come there, and whatever it is that you want, like if you're like, hey, this drill weekend, can the state office come down and do Premier training? That's inside of our scope of responsibility. So you request it, we will make it happen. You tell us the dates that are work for you, and we'll do what we can to get that done. And number two is if you're looking for specifically a list of online things and you don't have time to sort through all the YouTube links, that's also a reasonable ask of our office, is to say, I need tutorials on how to cut X, Y, and Z Premiere. We'll do all the research for you, and then we'll send you those links so you don't have to sit there on drill weekend when your time is so finite and get that knocked out. So those are two I would say, like band-aids for the bigger problem that we can see. Maybe I'll bring back up to our state.
Next year.
Hmm?
Next year.
What's happening next year? Oh, okay. So this is jumping the gun a little bit. I was gonna blow everyone's mind.
This is the real reason why.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do next year is the PA seminar. Just to start your track and what we're planning for right now is. Right now we're in absorb mode, right? We're all listening to all these great people talk and share their experiences. We're gonna alternate every year between listening and doing. So next year, we're gonna say, bring what you got. Bring your laptop, bring your cell phone, bring your cameras, bring what you got with you here, and we're gonna have breakout sessions where we just spend an hour and a half to 2 hours for an entire weekend doing photos, going over video, and you can pick. So, like if you're like, okay, I want to go and learn advanced photo because I'm an advanced photographer, I'm a good photographer, I know nothing about video. First half of the morning, you can do advanced photography, and then that afternoon we can do Premiere 101, or you can sort of pick your breakout sessions. And we're going to alternate every year, sort of what we're focusing on. So right now we're in absorb mode. Next year it's going to be, hey, let's execute and do some more stuff. I'll have more on that in our closing remarks today, so we'll kind of outline what we're thinking.
Any other questions?
I do, but I won't.
Come on, no, this is good conversation. Then.
The software, Creative Suite.
Mm-hmm.
So our comm downloads. I understand A plus and the Sec plus and all that kind of stuff. I don't understand it, but our comm loads the software, holds the software. When I approached them asking, I'm sure they have their own reasons, but when I asked them, why aren't we on the cloud license?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to purchase it. Every single time when there's an update, it'll throw it to you, so on and so forth. And I got back, I don't know, probably about a 2-hour dissertation on it, and just sounded dumber, or felt dumber than I started. Is there any movement from being able to have our software on the cloud on a monthly or yearly license? Is it possible if we talk our unit into doing it?
I believe so, yes. I think your unit can fund it. Where you start to run into trouble is with your network shops and how your computers are on the network. So like if
These aren't. I'm just talking about the
If
Macs.
you're doing standalones, you may be able to work a business license with your unit if they're willing to pay for the seats. It's possible, but it's when you start getting into, because I know like in the Army we have ours where it's they're now on Dell computers that are specifically made by our 6 shops so that we can plug into the network if we absolutely have to. And that's where you start running the stick. But
I would send a message to Senior Master on Movie and ask him what the air guard process is or policy is on that, because it goes along, I think it goes along with their equipment, and the air guard does things very differently when it comes to acquiring equipment. I would send him a message.
Okay.
I think he said, he had mentioned something about the software stuff when he was talking about the upgrade of equipment for you guys at the
Yeah,
conference.
but we don't have a deployment going on in the next 2 or 3 years, so.
But I'd
Way down
shoot
the
him a
line.
message to see if there's something, because I'm only tracking the Army chest stuff, so the Army, for the Army. Which is a pain in the butt to begin with.
All right. Hey, we really do appreciate this conversation. Hope it was helpful, if not for you personally, but something you can take back to your units and use as leaders, especially with your NCOs. Do you kind of have any closing thoughts or anything before we wrap up?
Not really. I know you briefly touched on it with the not being afraid to get in people's faces to take photos, but I just want to say if anybody wants to become a good photographer, you kind of have to just shake the feeling of being nervous or being self-conscious when you're out taking photos. You have to just be invisible and just get the shot. So that would be my biggest piece of advice for something like this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just that kind of same thing, just practice, practice, practice. If you've never done street photography, that's something that will kind of break you of being shy and taking pictures of people.
One thing I always tell my soldiers is that I expect you to be a technical expert on your piece of equipment. And that goes for, I think, any job in the Army. And so if you have soldiers who are just like I said, shooting full auto, really reinforce the importance of them being the technical expert on that piece of equipment. So definitely as a takeaway, just practice with that and know how your equipment works so you can get the most out of it. All right. Let's give it up for our panel. Thank you all very much.
I want to add one more thing. I get to sit at NGB during hurricane season, and with it coming, with it soon upon us, I'm begging you, please, 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 please caption your imagery, video and stills, because we will not use it unless it says the 5 W's. It could be the bestest picture in the whole world, but if we can't put it where it's